What is going on, everybody? Been a diehard Pistons fan since '03 and eager to see this team getting back to playing winning basketball. It is a busy week in the world of Detroit sports right now. I know a lot going on with the Lions. Of course, the Tigers are moving on in the baseball playoffs. The Pistons do kick off their preseason this weekend, but I did want to take some time today to talk about something that I feel is relevant, and that is a lineup from last year that the Pistons ran that was relatively successful that kind of slipped through the cracks. We're going to talk about that lineup and if we can see more of it in this upcoming season and try and replicate some of the small bit of success that we had with this lineup last year. So before we dive into it, I kind of want to lay the land for what we're looking at here, fellas. So right now, we can see that for last year, the Detroit Pistons had an offensive rating of 109 and a defensive rating of 118 for a net rating of -9. If you guys are unfamiliar with what this means, is it's pretty much the average points you put up for 100 possessions. That's your offensive rating. Your defensive rating is the average amount of points that you allow per 100 possessions. So the key takeaway here is the baseline is -9.1. That was our net rating for the entirety of last year. That means on average for every 100 possessions that the Pistons played, they lost those 100 possessions by -9.1 points, which was good for 28th out of 30th in the NBA. Surprisingly, despite having the worst record, we didn't have the worst net rating. That is because, well, there was two teams, I believe the Wizards and Hornets had worse net ratings. So they were just a part of more blowouts. So you might ask, why is this relevant? Because that's what we're going to dive into when we come down here and take a look at some of the net ratings for specific lineups and the one or two that just jump off the screen to me. So when we're looking here at five-man combinations from last season, the first takeaway that you notice compared to other years or other teams is we did not play five of the same guys at once very often at all. Very rarely will you see a five-man combination screen where only two of the lineups logged more than 100 minutes together. That is very rare. But when you kind of start looking here at the net rating for a lot of them, you notice most of them are pretty poor. -8, +2, -8, +8, +1, -7, -13, -21, -16. You can go on for days. So when you come here and sort by points, let's see what the key takeaway is. This lineup here was +32, and it was a small sample size. This lineup here was +10, and it was an even smaller sample size. Now, this is the first lineup that we see that has more than 50 minutes together. It's still not a huge sample size, but I want to talk about it because there is a trend, especially when you look at the next one here that was also in the positives that had a considerable amount of minutes. This lineup that played 90 minutes together was Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Simone Fontecchio, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren. They played 90 minutes together, and during those 90 minutes together, they beat their opponents by an average of 8 points per 100 possessions. The second lineup here that would share the floor for 113 minutes was the exact same lineup, Cade, Ivey, Fontecchio, Duren, but instead of Stewart, it included Asar, and that was +2.5. What does this tell us? This tells us that when Cade was on the floor with Ivey and Fontecchio and Duren, good things happened. If you can combine those two sample sets, that's well over 200 minutes of gameplay together for an average of around +4 or 5 points. That's not too bad. That's a sample size where you can start to draw some conclusions. What I'm looking at right here is a four-man rotation, which they also segment, of Cade, Ivey, Fontecchio, and Duren. And right here it is. Cade, Ivey, Fontecchio, and Duren shared the floor together for 231 minutes. And during that point in time, when those four shared the floor together, they were +1 per 100 possessions. Now, that means that there was a small 20-minute sample where those four shared the floor with somebody who wasn't Asar or Stewart, and things went south in a hurry. But I don't think that is too big of a takeaway, because considering how bad our net rating was for the entirety of last year, it's kind of crazy. The fact is, the big takeaway, I know this is a lot of numbers to look at and everything if you're not used to diving into this stuff. The big takeaway is when Fontecchio played with Cade, particularly with Ivey and Duren, good things happened. So what I want to talk about is why that was. The reason's pretty simple. when Cade has spacing, he allows him to run the offense at a level where he hasn't been able to the rest of his time in Detroit. The majority of his time in Detroit, he was playing with lineups like this that were terrible. Ones that had Killian, Asar together, or Ivy, Asar, Bagley together, just trash like that. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Just trash spacing. That's all it really is. Not even a shot at any of those players individually. So the takeaway when diving into this is that when Simone Fontecchio helped space the floor for Cade and the rest of the team, good things happen. The sample size isn't big enough that I can write home about it and say, yep, Simone Fontecchio is the key to this team being great. But what I can tell you is that I think it is 100% worth looking forward to lineups this year that include Fontecchio with Cade and probably those other guys, Duren and Ivy, and now Tobias as well. I think that those lineups with those guys can do good things, and I think that we will see more of it this year. To even get more granular, if you don't like looking at all of the kind of crazy net rating stuff and the advanced analytics, I won't even really call these advanced analytics. This is pretty basic level stuff here. Is just the 16 games Fontecchio played for us. I know it's a small sample size. Everything I'm talking about here is a small sample size. Like I said, we don't have to write home about it, but we can draw some conclusions. When Fontecchio played, now it was 16 games, and during those 16 games, we won 4 of them. On the surface, that doesn't sound great, but then you realize there's a game in here against Orlando where we lost by 3 with a controversial call at the end of the game that could have went the other way on a Paolo Banchero travel before he shot. The game after that, the New York Knicks, another 2-point loss where Dante DiVincenzo tackled Asar Thompson at the buzzer with no foul call. Those, just like that, 2 calls go our way. All of a sudden, now we're looking at 6 and 10 during that time frame. The other losses that we took during this time were more or less decent losses. 1 to Miami, 1 to Dallas, another 2 to Miami. Just decent teams that beat us by kind of regular margins, nothing too out of the ordinary. And also, during that time when Fontecchio was here, a lot of those games, he had a plus slash minus. That's a tongue twister. But that's the time when Monty kept running those all-bench lineups. I'll just click on a random one, like this 14-point loss to Indy. I guarantee you, of course, we played 11 guys where we had the 11th man getting 9-10 minutes per game. We had Sasser, Shake Milton, Malachi Flynn, Troy Brown Jr., Evan Fournier, and James Wiseman coming off the bench. And I don't even have to go back and watch the film. I can guarantee you Monty was running 5 of these 6 bench players together at once, and look at their minus versus plus minus. In case you guys don't know, this is like the margin of lead when they're on the floor. When Cade was out there, they were plus 10. When the full bench lineup checked in, they got ran off the floor. So you don't even have to look at the advanced analytics or anything. You can just go back and watch the games. When Cade was on the floor with Simone Fontecchio, they were generally beating their opponents until Monty subbed in the all-bench lineup to come in and tear apart the lead. So that gives me a lot of hope that if we go back to these lineups next season that include Cade, that include Fontecchio to provide Cade some spacing to help him out, and then throw in Duren at the 5, fill in the gaps with Ivy, Tobias, Beasley, or whoever you please, I think that the net ratings will look very, very close to a scratch draw, which will lead to the Pistons winning way more games than 14. That's all I got for you today, folks. Let me know what you guys think. I know this is a lot of numbers to look at, and it might just not be your cup of tea for these type of videos. We won't do them very often where I'm geeking out on basketball reference. But this is what I do in my spare time when I'm not recording videos, so I kind of wanted to share my input on this one with you all. See ya.